L'arte non è mai finita, solo abbandonata. Okay, this is not an Italian lesson. Art is never finished, only abandoned. So by now, you know how we do this. I give you a quote from my best stash, and then we have a short discussion about the meaning of the quote, and I add my thoughts about how it can empower your work. Today's quote is from Leonardo da Vinci. I know I talk about Da Vinci a lot, but Da Vinci Resolve is something completely different. With Leonardo, and especially with this quote, it's good to examine the source as well as the quote itself. Keep in mind, Leonardo was an artist, and so was probably inspired to coin this quote because he was, as we are now in 2025, prone to overthinking and wanted to confront that to get things done. A look at some of his other quotes shows he had an intense interest in productivity, and his amazing work shows he strived for perfection. In fact, based on research that I did for this video, it's clear that he was at least somewhat prone to leaving things uncompleted, and that includes some of the really famous stuff, like the Mona Lisa, which I understand was started in 1503 and was still unfinished at the time of his death. Plus, he never delivered it to the person who commissioned it. Also, he's been primarily and famously known since he came on the scene in the 1400s as a master of painting. Yet, he was also at least as prolific in his sketches. There are about 13,000 pages of these, and you've seen them. They're very detailed. These have to do with his anatomical research, his inventions, stuff like that. He was an inventor, a painter, a draftsman, an engineer, a scientist, a theorist, a sculptor, an architect. He was quite the polymath, very Renaissance. The reason why I bring that up is because for me, it's easier to work when I don't think of myself as a professional. So for example, I am much more of a control freak with music than I am with anything else I do, from YouTube videos to painting a wall. What if the inventor thing was for Leonardo what grouting the bathtub is for me? Bet you he was a better bathtub grouter too. Now, I started becoming intensely interested in quotes in grad school about 13 years ago, and at that time I came across this quote when I was also soul-searching about a counterproductive trait that I have, which is to leave things uncompleted. In my second semester of grad school, I was struggling with this problem, which is actually intensified over the years as I've grown more as a composer and musician. So pretty much every semester you would write a piece and have it played at the end of your semester by a guest ensemble at the college. I wrote a piece that I called Abandonment. This was my acknowledgement that I was going to let that piece go free in a timely way once I'd done my work on it. I did it as a way of saying I would be finishing and as a way of trying to confront this toxic tendency of just giving up on something. Art is never finished, only abandoned. This means several things to me. The first is to accept that because perfection is impossible in pretty much any endeavor, it's not possible in your works of art. Also, as a corollary, one person's perfection is not another person's. When I think of how a writer can be thought of as just the best by some and then ruthlessly vilified by others, that's a clue that chasing perfection is a losing strategy. The second is defining the concept of finished. That includes sharing your work. Now, as I have thought this through over the years, I've thought about this stuff a lot, I've pretty much come to the conclusion that in order to give to one aspect of a creation, you have to take from or neglect or ignore a different aspect. You can see this throughout music history and people's output, and today as well. Tchaikovsky, famously thought of as a lightweight composer. He's wonderfully melodic, and he's not the greatest at form and structure. Steely Dan, talk about love and hate. Some people hate how polished their stuff is, Some people love it. Taylor Swift. Making your art accessible means limiting complexity, but boy, does she really speak to her audience in a strong way. Almost any decision is by definition deciding for something and against something else simultaneously. Now, assuming you accept nothing is ever perfect, how do you even decide when you're done? Leonardo's answer, vis-a-vis this quote, is to decide at some juncture you must abandon it. When is that? Now, the important distinction here is that abandonment doesn't mean that you just ignore it. It means that some consideration makes the production of it end. And is it always improving if you're avoiding letting go to endlessly tweak? Now, here's something from economics, the law of diminishing returns. It's also known as the law of diminishing marginal productivity. Stay with me here. This is not really, it sounds worse than it is, which basically says at a certain point, additional effort does not correlate with commensurate economic gains. What does this mean for artists? If an artist spends X amount of time on a project, they may create a high-quality product. However, if they continue to grind on that project for a significantly longer period of time, they may reach a point at where the additional effort does not result in a significantly better outcome. In this case, the law of diminishing returns has set in, as the artist would not be creating a proportional increase in quality for their additional effort. It's interesting when you examine this. A case from my personal life. A few years back, I was cleaning out my tape library and I came across a song that I had recorded and mixed. I went back to have a listen, and when I pulled out the notes from the case, I realized I had 41 goddamn mixes of it. That would have been before automation and DAWs. So one would do a mix, like a performance, beginning to end, and then try to improve on that mix. I hadn't kept copious notes about the minute changes I made, and what I quickly realized when I listened to mix 40 and then mix 41, I had no clue whatsoever what was different about those two mixes. Now think of this. This was a 4-minute song, so that means there was over 2.5 hours of printed mixes. Who knows how much work I did in between, listening to the mixes, tweaking compressors, EQ, levels. It's likely it was an 8-hour day at least. Now, since then, I've figured out a few ways to cope with that in the creative process. One is a rules-based approach. So often I record things alone. I'm recording by myself in a room, and it's a recipe for going nuts. So I have a rule. When I'm recording an accompanimental part, I only allow myself 3 takes. If I'm not succeeding after 3 takes, I'll go away and practice or rethink the part, but I won't record infinite takes. Afterwards, I listen to take 3 and then take 2, maybe do a little comping, declare a winner. Then I listen to the winner versus take 1, maybe do a little comping there. That's what I go with. But I never want to go over the 3 recorded takes because it becomes too ungainly. Another one, the deadline-based approach. A few years ago, I got a phone call to try a version of God Save the Queen for guitar for a network news division. I don't recall, but I think there was something happening in the UK in the news. Maybe it was a royal wedding or something. And this news organization was covering that. And the brief was they wanted it in the style of Jimi Hendrix's version of the Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock, which is a tall order. But I only had an hour to do it. And in the end, I didn't get the gig. But when the hour passed, I sent them what I had because it was time to abandon it and hope for the best. And with my YouTube videos, I'm abandoning things all the time. I do tutorials sometimes, and tutorials have a lot of graphics, a lot of scrolling, a lot of zooming. So once I've got the A-roll cut, I put markers at the point where I want the graphics. And then I look through the list and rate those markers in order of importance. Then I give myself a specified amount of time, an hour, 2 hours, whatever. And I do as many as I can in order of importance. And then at some point, I either forget or compromise on the rest. The one thing I'm not abandoning is the fact that I finish and publish every video that gets to the point of being filmed. It's more important to get the video up. It's more important to help people than it is to try and get some really great stinger when text on a black background will work just as well to get the point across. And, this speaks to the power of the iterative process. That is, go hard, get the thing done, and then move on to the next thing. So I hope this gives you some food for thought. I'm inclined to think that a lot of us in this community are actually too worried about being perfect. Sometimes it stops us from starting. Sometimes it stops us from finishing. Sometimes you just need to move on and forget about trying that 40-second mix, especially if your future self isn't going to notice the difference between mix 40 and mix 41. See you soon.